Have you ever fought a landlord or property manager in court and won? Back in 2008, right in the middle of the housing crisis, I lucked into one of the cheapest rentals I've ever had. I was helping a customer with some computer work when he mentioned he had a small one-bedroom place available. It turned out to be a detached garage that had been converted into an apartment. It was plain, boxy, and furnished with the cheapest materials possible. Old light fixtures, thin countertops, faucets that felt like they would snap if you touched them too hard. But the rent was almost half of what similar one-bedroom apartments in the area cost. The landlord, an older gentleman, had rented the main house for full market value, so this garage unit was basically extra income for him. He and I came to an agreement. I could upgrade things myself, and as long as I kept paying rent, he wouldn't raise it. If something broke, I could pay the difference to replace it with better features. It was a win-win situation, so I made the place livable. I replaced the kitchen faucet with a modern sprayer model that even had a bar-style glass cleaner. I installed a water-saving toilet with a bidet. The old 1980s lights were swapped for smart LED fixtures. Piece by piece, I turned a plain converted garage into a comfortable home. For years, the rent stayed low, and my landlord was perfectly happy with the arrangement. After almost 8 years, things changed. My landlord had a serious heart attack and decided he couldn't keep up with managing properties anymore. He turned everything over to a property management company. That's when the trouble began. From the very first month, they raised my rent the maximum allowed, 10% plus another 5% for cost of living. I wasn't happy, but technically it was still under market, so I stayed. The following year, the same increase came again, and again the year after. By the fourth hike, my cheap little garage apartment wasn't really cheap anymore. It was still slightly under average, but the constant increases were eating into my savings, which I was trying to build for a down payment on a house. Then came 2020. By this point, I had lived in the unit for 12 years, and then, right in the middle of the pandemic, a pipe burst in the kitchen. Water poured across the floor, ruining the old cabinets, soaking the carpet, and damaging some of my furniture. My renter's insurance covered a portion of the loss, but I still had to say goodbye to my couch, desk, and entertainment center. The property management team showed up, but instead of working with me, they made everything worse. I offered to pay for upgraded cabinets and hardwood floors, since everything had to be replaced anyway. They refused. I offered to do the work myself. They refused again, sending me a letter saying I was not allowed to perform any maintenance or upgrades. For the next 2 months, the place was a construction zone. They left a door-sized hole in the wall, ripped out fixtures, and made it nearly impossible to live there while I worked from home. To make matters worse, they threw out the upgrades I had already installed. My faucet, my sink, my light fixtures, all of which were undamaged. They even removed one of the original outlets just to cut costs. And then came the kicker. They sent me a notice claiming the damage was due to neglect and used that as an excuse to raise my rent again. That was the final straw. I gave my 30-day notice, but I didn't leave quietly. I prepared a detailed invoice of every improvement I had made over 12 years, complete with before and after photos, receipts, and a copy of my lease agreement that clearly allowed me to perform upgrades. I also included a demand for a refund of the extra rent they charged under the excuse of neglect. Altogether, it added up to just over $9,700. I also filed the claim in court. As I expected, the property management company fought it, but my landlord backed me up. He testified that I had always been allowed to make repairs and upgrades, just like our lease agreement stated. The judge cut out my billable hours, but still awarded me $4,700. More importantly, the judge scolded the property management lawyer, reminding them that tenants are legally entitled to housing during major repairs. With penalties and late fees added later, I eventually collected $7,500. It took a few years to receive the full payout, but I finally did. By then, my landlord had sadly passed away, and his son inherited the properties. One of the first things he did was fire the property management company. After 12 years in that little garage apartment, I moved into a house of my own, with a check in hand and the satisfaction of knowing the management company that made my life so difficult had to pay for their mistakes.